The black Mercedes sedan glided through the unfamiliar streets as 8-year-old Emma pressed her small face against the cool window glass. Her breath fogged the surface as she watched the landscape change from the manicured lawns and towering mansions of their neighborhood to something entirely different. The houses here were smaller, closer together, with peeling paint and overgrown yards that looked nothing like the pristine estate she was accustomed to seeing. "Mr. Harrison," Emma said softly, turning to look at the man sitting beside her in the leather seat. Marcus Harrison, 52 years old and worth more money than most people could imagine, was absorbed in his phone, his fingers dancing across the screen as he managed what seemed like a dozen different business crises simultaneously. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit immaculate despite the long day, and his gold watch caught the afternoon light streaming through the tinted windows. "Just a moment, sweetheart," Marcus murmured without looking up, his voice carrying that familiar tone of distracted affection that Emma had grown used to over the past 3 years. Ever since her parents had died in the car accident and Marcus had taken her in, she had learned to navigate the complex rhythms of his attention. He cared for her deeply, she knew that, but his world was vast and demanding in ways that an 8-year-old could only begin to understand. Emma turned back to the window, watching as they passed a small grocery store with bars on its windows and a group of teenagers gathered on a street corner. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. The route to her piano lesson was as familiar to her as the hallways of Marcus's mansion. She had made this trip twice a week for the past year, always the same path through the affluent neighborhoods, past the country club where Marcus played golf, around the fountain in Meridian Square, and then down Elm Street to Mrs. Patterson's music studio. But this wasn't Elm Street. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. The driver, a man she had never seen before, sat rigidly in the front seat. Usually, Thomas drove her to lessons. Thomas had been with Marcus for over a decade, a kind man with gentle eyes who always asked about her day and kept peppermints in his jacket pocket. This driver was different. Younger, with nervous energy that seemed to radiate from his shoulders. His eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, not to check on traffic, but to look at them. Emma felt a flutter of unease in her stomach. She was a perceptive child, made more so by the tragedy that had reshaped her young life. Living with Marcus had taught her to read the subtle signs of adult anxiety, to sense when something was amiss in the carefully ordered world he had created around them both. "Mr. Harrison," she said again, this time with more urgency in her voice. "I think the driver took the wrong road." Marcus glanced up from his phone, his blue eyes focusing on her with the kind of attention that made Emma feel like the most important person in the world. It was one of the things she loved most about him, the way he could shift from distant businessman to devoted father figure in an instant. "What do you mean, Emma?" he asked, setting his phone aside and following her gaze out the window. "This isn't the way to Mrs. Patterson's house," Emma explained, her small hands pressed against the glass. "We always go past the big fountain and the place where they sell the pretty flowers. But we're going a different way today." Marcus looked around for the first time since they had gotten into the car, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to something sharper. Emma watched as his eyes took in the unfamiliar surroundings, the way the buildings seemed to press closer to the street, the different quality of light that came from fewer trees and more concrete. "Driver," Marcus called out, his voice carrying a note of authority that Emma had heard him use in business meetings. "This doesn't look like our usual route to the music studio." The driver's shoulders tensed visibly. "Traffic, sir," he said without turning around. "Had to take a detour." But Emma could see that there was no traffic. The streets they were traveling were relatively empty, nothing like the congested main roads that sometimes forced Thomas to find alternate routes. She looked up at Marcus and saw that he had noticed the same thing. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his businessman's instincts beginning to override his initial trust. "What's your name?" he asked the driver. "I don't believe we've met." "Rodriguez, sir," the man replied, but his voice carried a tremor that made Emma shrink closer to Marcus's side. "Where's Thomas today?" Marcus pressed, his tone becoming more clipped and businesslike. "Called in sick, sir. I'm filling in." Emma felt Marcus's body tense beside her. She had spent enough time with him to recognize the signs when he was shifting into what she privately thought of as his dangerous mode, the focused intensity that made him so successful in business, and she was beginning to understand. So formidable when threatened. "Pull over," Marcus said quietly. "Sir." I said pull over. "Now." The driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We're almost there, sir. Just a few more minutes." That was when Marcus began to shake. Emma had never seen him like this before. Marcus Harrison was the most composed person she knew, a man who had built an empire through careful calculation and unshakable confidence. She had watched him handle million-dollar deals with the same calm demeanor he used when helping her with homework. But now, as the reality of their situation began to sink in, she could see his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his phone. "Emma," he said, his voice steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes, "I want you to listen to me very carefully." She nodded, her own heart beginning to race as she picked up on his anxiety. "We're going to be okay," he continued, "but I need you to be very brave right now. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison," she whispered. Marcus tried to unlock his phone, but his hands were shaking more noticeably now. The device slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor of the car. As he bent to retrieve it, Emma saw something that made her stomach drop. The driver was watching them in the rearview mirror again, and this time she could see his eyes clearly. They were cold, calculating, nothing like Thomas's warm brown eyes that always crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Driver," Marcus said again, his voice now carrying an edge of steel, "I'm going to ask you one more time to pull this car over immediately." Instead of complying, the driver pressed harder on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, and Emma grabbed onto Marcus's arm instinctively. Through the windshield, she could see that they were heading toward what looked like an industrial area, with large warehouses and fewer people on the streets. Marcus managed to retrieve his phone and began dialing, but the driver suddenly swerved hard to the right, sending both Marcus and Emma sliding across the leather seat. The phone flew from Marcus's hands again, this time landing somewhere under the front passenger seat where he couldn't reach it. "What do you want?" Marcus demanded, his voice now openly hostile. The driver finally turned around, and Emma saw a face that would haunt her dreams for years to come. It was a young man, maybe in his 20s, with desperate eyes and a thin scar running from his left ear to his jaw. "What I want," the man said, "is for you to sit back and shut up until we get where we're going." Emma felt Marcus's arm come around her protectively, pulling her close against his side. She could feel the rapid beating of his heart through his expensive suit jacket, could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed now with something else, something sharp and fearful that she had never associated with him before. "If this is about money," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice level, "we can work something out. I can give you whatever you need." The driver laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, this is definitely about money. More money than you've probably ever thought about losing all at once." They were deep in the industrial district now, surrounded by towering buildings that blocked out much of the afternoon sun. Emma could see loading docks and chain-link fences, places that looked nothing like the safe, beautiful world she had known since coming to live with Marcus. "Please," Marcus said, and Emma was shocked to hear the pleading note in his voice. "The little girl has nothing to do with this. Whatever you want from me, she doesn't need to be involved." "The little girl," the driver said, glancing back at Emma with those cold eyes, "is the whole point." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She pressed closer to Marcus, who was now shaking so hard that she could feel the tremors through his entire body. The man who had always been her rock, her source of strength and security, was as frightened as she was. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "You will," the driver replied, turning his attention back to the road as he navigated between two large warehouses. Emma tried to think of something, anything, that might help them. She was just a child, but she was a smart child, and she had learned to be observant in the years since her parents' death. She looked around the car, searching for anything that might be useful. The doors were locked. She could see that from the position of the buttons. The windows were tinted and appeared to be the kind that wouldn't break easily. But then she remembered something. Marcus had shown her once, during one of their drives, how the car's GPS system worked. He had explained that it was always tracking their location, always recording where they went. If someone was looking for them, if Thomas realized something was wrong, they might be able to trace the car's movements. "Mr. Harrison," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear, "the GPS." Marcus looked down at her with confusion for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. He glanced toward the dashboard where the navigation screen glowed softly, showing their current location as they moved deeper into the industrial maze. The car began to slow, and Emma could see that they were approaching a large warehouse with several other vehicles parked outside. The building looked abandoned, with broken windows and graffiti covering the lower portions of the walls. It was exactly the kind of place where bad things happened in the movies Marcus sometimes watched when he thought she was asleep. "End of the line," the driver announced, bringing the car to a stop. Emma felt Marcus's grip on her tighten. His shaking had become more pronounced, and she could hear his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. She had never seen an adult panic attack before, but some instinct told her that was what was happening to him. Mr. Harrison, she whispered, breathe with me. Like when we do yoga in the mornings. It was something they had started doing together, a quiet ritual before the chaos of his business day began. Emma had learned the breathing exercises from a children's book about managing anxiety, something she had needed in the months after her parents' death. Now, she tried to use those same techniques to help the man who had become her whole world. In through your nose, she whispered, demonstrating. Out through your mouth. Marcus looked down at her, his eyes wide with fear but also with something that might have been amazement. Here was this 8-year-old child, in the most terrifying situation of her young life, trying to take care of him. The driver got out of the car and walked around to Marcus's door. Emma could see other men emerging from the warehouse, at least 3 of them, all looking like the kind of people Marcus had always warned her to stay away from if she was ever separated from him in public. Time to go, the driver said, opening the door. Marcus didn't move. His shaking had intensified, and Emma realized with a growing sense of panic that he might not be able to function at all. The strong, capable man who had rebuilt her life after tragedy was falling apart, and she was going to have to be strong for both of them. Mr. Harrison, she said firmly, using the same tone she had heard him use in important phone calls, we have to go. But we're going to be okay. I promise. It was a promise she had no business making, but it seemed to help. Marcus took a shuddering breath and managed to get his legs under him. As they stepped out of the car together, Emma slipped her small hand into his much larger one, surprised by how cold and clammy his palm felt. The warehouse loomed above them, its broken windows like dead eyes staring down at the scene below. Emma tried to memorize everything she could see, the way Marcus had taught her to do when they visited new places. The license plates of the other cars, the faces of the men waiting for them, the position of the sun in the sky. If they got out of this, if someone came looking for them, every detail might be important. One of the men from the warehouse approached them. He was older than the driver, with gray hair and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the industrial setting. When he spoke, his voice carried an accent that Emma couldn't identify. Mr. Harrison, he said with mock politeness, so good of you to join us. And this must be little Emma. The fact that he knew her name sent another wave of terror through her small body. This wasn't random. These people had planned this, had studied them, had known exactly how to get to Marcus through her. What do you want? Marcus managed to ask, though his voice was still shaky. What I want, the older man said, is very simple. You're going to transfer $50 million to an account that I will provide. In exchange, you and the little girl will be allowed to leave here unharmed. Emma felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers. $50 million was more money than she could even imagine, but she knew that Marcus had it. She had overheard enough of his phone conversations to understand that he was wealthy beyond most people's comprehension. And if I refuse? Marcus asked. The older man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then little Emma here will learn some very unpleasant lessons about what happens to people who don't cooperate. Emma felt Marcus's whole body shudder at the threat. She looked up at him and saw something in his expression that she had never seen before, a kind of desperate fury that made her think of a trapped animal. You can have whatever you want, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger with each word. But you will not touch her. Do you understand me? You will not lay a finger on her. That, the older man said, depends entirely on how cooperative you are. They were led into the warehouse, Emma's small hand still clasped tightly in Marcus's trembling one. The interior was dimly lit, with shafts of dusty sunlight streaming through the broken windows high above. There were chairs set up in the center of the space, clearly prepared for their arrival. As they walked deeper into the building, Emma tried to keep track of everything she saw. There were at least 5 men that she could count, maybe more moving in the shadows. She saw what looked like computer equipment set up on a table, probably for the money transfer. Near the back of the warehouse, she glimpsed what might have been a small room or office, somewhere they might be planning to keep them while the transaction was completed. Marcus was guided to one of the chairs, and Emma was placed in another beside him. The older man pulled up a third chair and sat down facing them, while the others positioned themselves around the space like guards. Now then, the older man said, producing a tablet computer, let's discuss the details of our transaction. Emma watched as Marcus was forced to access his bank accounts, his hands still shaking as he navigated through the security protocols and authorization processes. She had seen him handle business deals before, had watched him negotiate and strategize with the calm confidence of someone who always held the upper hand. This was different. This was Marcus stripped of all his usual advantages, reduced to a frightened man trying to protect the child he loved. The process took over an hour. There were multiple accounts to access, verification procedures to complete, and authorization codes to enter. Through it all, Emma sat quietly beside Marcus, her small presence the only thing that seemed to anchor him to any semblance of calm. As the sun began to set outside, casting longer shadows through the warehouse windows, Emma realized that something was wrong with the kidnappers' plan. They had gotten the money, she could tell from the satisfied expressions on their faces, but they weren't preparing to let her and Marcus go. Instead, they were having hushed conversations in the corners of the warehouse, the kind of urgent whispered discussions that adults had when they were trying to decide something important and unpleasant. Emma had learned to read adult body language in the years since her parents' death. She could tell when Marcus was stressed about business, when the housekeeper was worried about something, when Thomas was concerned about traffic or weather. Now, she can see that these men were arguing about what to do with their captives. "Mr. Harrison," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear, "I don't think they're going to let us go." Marcus looked down at her, and she could see in his eyes that he had reached the same conclusion. The shaking that had subsided somewhat during the money transfer was beginning to return, and she could see the panic starting to build in his expression again. "Emma," he whispered back, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. If I tell you to run, I want you to run as fast as you can toward that door we came in through. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just run until you find help." "I won't leave you," she said firmly. "You have to promise me," Marcus insisted, his voice urgent. "If something happens to me, you have to save yourself. That's the most important thing." Emma shook her head stubbornly. "We're going to get out of this together. Both of us." Before Marcus could respond, the older man approached them again. His expression had changed, become harder and more businesslike. "I'm afraid there's been a complication," he said. "It seems that your bank has flagged the transfers as suspicious. They're asking for additional verification." Emma saw Marcus's face go pale. "What kind of verification?" "They want you to appear in person at the main branch tomorrow morning, with proper identification and a written explanation for the large transfers." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "You can't expect me to walk into a bank and pretend everything is normal." "Actually," the older man said, "that's exactly what I expect you to do. You'll go to the bank, you'll complete the verification process, and then you'll return here. And then you'll let us go?" The older man didn't answer directly. "Let's just focus on completing the transaction first." Emma felt a chill run through her. She was only 8 years old, but she understood enough about the adult world to know that these men had no intention of letting them go. They couldn't afford to have witnesses, couldn't risk Marcus going to the police once he and Emma were safe. As if reading her thoughts, Marcus suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. "I want to speak with you privately," he said to the older man. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of the child." "No," Marcus said firmly, and Emma was surprised by the strength that had returned to his voice. "This is between adults. Give me 5 minutes to discuss terms." The older man studied Marcus for a long moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. But the girl stays here." Emma watched with growing anxiety as Marcus was led to the far corner of the warehouse. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Marcus gesturing emphatically, his whole body language communicating desperation and urgency. The older man listened with the patience of someone who held all the cards. While they talked, Emma looked around the warehouse more carefully. She was a small child, and adults often forgot how observant children could be. She noticed things they might not think were important, like the fact that one of the guards kept checking his phone, as if he was expecting a call. Like the way the driver from the car kept looking toward the main entrance, as if he was nervous about something. Most importantly, she noticed that there was a second exit at the back of the warehouse, partially hidden behind some old equipment. It was smaller than the main entrance, probably meant for employees rather than vehicles. And it didn't seem to be guarded as carefully as the front door. When Marcus returned to her side, his face was grim but determined. "Emma," he said quietly, "I need you to trust me. Whatever happens next, I need you to do exactly what I tell you to do." "What did you tell them?" she asked. "I told them that I have additional assets they might be interested in. Securities, investments, things that would take a few days to liquidate but would be worth much more than what they've already taken." Emma looked at him skeptically. Even at 8 years old, she could tell when an adult was not telling her the complete truth. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "what are you really planning?" Marcus looked down at her with an expression of such love and sadness that it made her heart ache. "I'm planning to keep you safe, sweetheart. That's all that matters to me." Before Emma could respond, there was a commotion near the main entrance. One of the guards was talking urgently into a radio, and the others were moving toward the windows, trying to see outside without exposing themselves. "What's happening?" the older man demanded. "There's a car outside," the guard reported. Looks like it might be security. Emma felt a surge of hope. Maybe Thomas had realized something was wrong. Maybe someone had traced the GPS signal from their car. Maybe help had finally arrived. But the older man was already adapting to the new situation. Move them to the back room, he ordered, gesturing toward Marcus and Emma, and prepare for the possibility that we might need to leave quickly. As they were hustled toward the small office space at the rear of the warehouse, Emma caught Marcus's eye. She could see that he was thinking the same thing she was. If they were going to make a move, it had to be now, while their captors were distracted by whatever was happening outside. The back room was small and windowless, with concrete walls and a single door. It felt like a prison cell, and Emma realized with growing horror that this might be where they were planning to keep them permanently. Or worse, where they were planning to eliminate the witnesses to their crime. Marcus seemed to come to the same realization. His shaking had stopped entirely, replaced by a kind of focused intensity that Emma had never seen in him before. It was as if the immediate threat to her safety had burned away his panic and left behind something harder and more dangerous. "Emma," he said quietly, "do you remember what I taught you about the panic button in my car?" She nodded. Marcus had shown her the hidden button that would send an emergency signal to his security company, along with their exact GPS coordinates. "There's a similar system in my watch," he continued, showing her the expensive timepiece on his wrist. "If I can activate it, it will send our location to the police and to my security team." "Why haven't you used it already?" Emma asked. "Because I needed to wait until we were stationary long enough for them to get a clear signal. And because I needed to make sure you were ready to run when the time came." Emma looked toward the door of the small room. She could hear the muffled voices of their captors, could sense the tension and urgency in their movements as they dealt with whatever was happening outside. "I'm ready," she said. Marcus smiled at her, and for a moment he looked like the confident, capable man she had always known. "That's my brave girl." He pressed something on his watch, and Emma saw a small light blink briefly. Then they waited, listening to the sounds from the main warehouse, hoping that help would arrive before their captors decided to cut their losses and eliminate the witnesses. The minutes stretched endlessly. Emma could hear vehicles outside, voices shouting, the sound of footsteps running across concrete. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to have all of their captors' attention focused on the front of the building. "Now," Marcus whispered. He tried the door handle and found it unlocked. Apparently, their captors had been too distracted to properly secure them. Marcus peered out into the main warehouse, then gestured for Emma to follow him. They moved as quietly as possible toward the back exit Emma had spotted earlier. The warehouse was in chaos, with men running back and forth, radios crackling, and the older man shouting orders that seemed to contradict each other. They were almost to the back door when one of the guards spotted them. "Hey," he shouted. "They're trying to escape. Run." Marcus yelled to Emma, pushing her toward the exit. Emma ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her small legs carrying her across the concrete floor while behind her she could hear the sounds of pursuit. Marcus was right behind her, his longer stride easily keeping pace despite his earlier panic. They burst through the back door into the fading daylight of early evening. Emma could see that they were in an alley behind the warehouse, with other industrial buildings rising on either side. In the distance, she could hear sirens, the sound of help finally arriving. "This way," Marcus said, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward what looked like a main street at the end of the alley. Behind them, the warehouse door slammed open and their captors poured out in pursuit. Emma could hear them shouting, could hear the sound of footsteps pounding on asphalt as they gave chase. Marcus was breathing hard, his face flushed with exertion and fear, but he kept moving, kept pulling Emma along beside him. They reached the end of the alley and emerged onto a street where Emma could see police cars approaching from both directions, their lights flashing and sirens wailing. "Here," Marcus shouted, waving his arms frantically. "We're here." The police cars screeched to a halt, and officers poured out with their weapons drawn. Emma found herself surrounded by uniforms and badges, by adults who were asking rapid-fire questions and trying to assess the situation. "The warehouse," Marcus gasped, pointing back toward the building they had just escaped from. "There are at least 5 of them, maybe more. They're armed." Emma watched as the police coordinated their response, some officers moving toward the warehouse while others stayed to protect her and Marcus. She could see more vehicles arriving, including what looked like a SWAT team and several unmarked cars that probably contained FBI agents. As the immediate danger receded, Emma felt the adrenaline leaving her system, replaced by exhaustion and delayed shock. She looked up at Marcus and saw that he was shaking again, but this time it seemed to be from relief rather than fear. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling down to her level and checking her for injuries. "I'm okay," she said, and realized that it was true. She was scared, she was tired, and she would probably have nightmares for weeks, but she was fundamentally okay. More importantly, they were both alive and safe. A paramedic approached them, wanting to check them both for injuries and signs of shock. As Emma submitted to the examination, she watched the police operation unfold around the warehouse. She could see officers moving in tactical formation, could hear the amplified voice of someone with a bullhorn calling for the kidnappers to surrender. "Mr. Harrison," she said as the paramedic checked her pulse, "how did the police know where to find us?" Marcus smiled, holding up his watch. "The panic signal worked exactly like it was supposed to. As soon as I activated it, it sent our GPS coordinates to my security company, and they called the police. But how did they get here so fast?" "Thomas," Marcus explained. "When he realized that someone else was driving you to your lesson, he called my security team immediately. They were already looking for us when the panic signal came through." Emma felt a wave of affection for the gentle driver who had always been so kind to her. Even when he was sick, he had been looking out for her safety. The standoff at the warehouse continued for another hour. Emma and Marcus were moved to a safe distance, where they gave their statements to FBI agents and tried to process everything that had happened. Emma found herself surprisingly calm as she recounted the events, describing the kidnappers in detail and explaining how she had first realized they were in danger. "You're a very observant little girl," one of the agents told her. "The information you've provided is going to be very helpful in our investigation." As the sun set completely and the warehouse area was illuminated by police floodlights, Emma learned that all 5 kidnappers had been arrested. The older man, who turned out to be wanted in connection with several other kidnapping cases, had tried to negotiate his surrender in exchange for a reduced sentence. The driver and the other accomplices had given up without a fight once they realized they were surrounded. "What about the money?" Emma asked Marcus as they sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in blankets and drinking hot chocolate that one of the officers had brought them. "The FBI will work with the banks to reverse the transfers," Marcus explained. "It might take some time, but we should be able to recover most of it." Emma nodded, though she found that she didn't really care about the money. What mattered was that they were safe, that they were together, and that the bad men couldn't hurt anyone else. As they prepared to leave the scene, Emma looked back at the warehouse one more time. It had been the site of the most terrifying experience of her young life, but it had also been the place where she had learned something important about herself. She was braver than she had thought, stronger than she had known, and capable of taking care of the people she loved even when she was scared. "Mr. Harrison," she said as they got into the police car that would take them home, "I'm glad I was with you today." Marcus looked at her with surprise. "Emma, you shouldn't have had to go through any of this. I'm so sorry that my business put you in danger. But if I hadn't been there," Emma said, "you might not have been able to stay calm enough to get us out. We took care of each other." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Emma could see tears in his eyes. "Yes," he said finally, "I suppose we did." The drive home took them back through the familiar neighborhoods Emma knew so well, past the manicured lawns and towering mansions that had seemed so safe just that morning. Everything looked the same, but Emma felt different. She had seen a side of the world that most 8-year-olds never encountered, had faced real danger and survived it. More importantly, she had seen Marcus at his most vulnerable and had learned that even the strongest adults sometimes needed someone to take care of them. It was a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her life, shaping her understanding of courage, love, and the complex ways that people depend on each other. When they finally arrived at the mansion, Thomas was waiting for them in the driveway. His face was pale with worry, and Emma could see that he had been crying. He embraced them both, apologizing over and over for not being there to protect them. "It's not your fault, Thomas," Marcus assured him. "You're the reason we're safe. If you hadn't called security when you did, this could have ended very differently." As they walked into the house together, Emma felt the familiar comfort of home surrounding her. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the expensive artwork on the walls, all of it was exactly as they had left it that morning. But she knew that something fundamental had changed between her and Marcus. They had been through something together that had stripped away all the usual barriers between adult and child, protector and protected. They had seen each other's fear and courage, had depended on each other for survival, and had emerged stronger for the experience. That night, as Emma lay in her bed with its soft pink comforter and collection of stuffed animals, she thought about the events of the day. She thought about the moment when she had first realized they were in danger, about Marcus's shaking hands and frightened eyes, about the warehouse and the bad men and the sound of sirens in the distance. But mostly, she thought about the way Marcus had looked at her when she had tried to help him breathe, when she had promised him that everything would be okay. It was the look of someone who had discovered that love could flow in both directions, that even a small child could be a source of strength and comfort when the world became dangerous and uncertain. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus peered in, still wearing the same rumpled suit from their ordeal, though he had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not really," Emma admitted. Marcus came into the room and sat on the edge of her bed, something he had done countless times since she had come to live with him. But tonight felt different, more intimate somehow, as if the shared trauma had deepened their connection in ways that ordinary life never could. "I want you to know," Marcus said, "that what happened today was not your fault. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's nothing anyone could have done to prevent it." "I know," Emma said, "but I'm glad we were together. I'm glad I could help you when you were scared." Marcus smiled, reaching out to smooth her hair away from her face. "You were incredibly brave today, Emma. Braver than I was, in many ways." "You were brave too," she insisted. "You protected me. You made sure I was safe." "We protected each other," Marcus said, and Emma could hear the wonder in his voice, as if he was still processing the reality of what had happened between them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of them processing the events of the day in their own ways. Emma felt safe here in her room, with Marcus beside her and the familiar sounds of the house settling around them. The outside world, with its dangers and uncertainties, seemed very far away. "Mr. Harrison," Emma said finally, "are you going to be okay? I mean, are you going to stop shaking and being scared?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think so," he said. "It might take some time, and I might need to talk to someone about what happened, but yes, I think I'm going to be okay. What about you?" "I think I'm going to be okay too," Emma said. "But I might have some bad dreams for a while." "That's perfectly normal," Marcus assured her. "And if you do have bad dreams, you can always come find me. Day or night." "Okay." Emma nodded, feeling a deep sense of security in that promise. She knew that Marcus meant it, that their shared experience had created a bond between them that would endure whatever challenges lay ahead. As Marcus stood to leave, Emma called out to him one more time. "Mr. Harrison, I love you." It was something she had never said before, though she had felt it for a long time. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, simple and profound and full of meaning that went far beyond their usual relationship. Marcus's eyes filled with tears again, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you too, Emma, more than you could ever know." After he left, Emma lay in her bed thinking about love and fear and courage, about the way ordinary days could suddenly become extraordinary, about the complex bonds that connected people to each other across all the differences in age and experience and power. She thought about the moment in the car when she had first realized they were in danger, when she had looked at Marcus and said those simple words that had started everything. The driver took the wrong road. Such a small observation, but it had been the beginning of the most important day of her young life. Outside her window, the familiar sounds of the neighborhood continued as they always had. Dogs barking in the distance, the occasional car passing on the street, the rustle of wind through the trees that lined their property. Everything was normal and safe and exactly as it should be. But Emma knew that she would never again take that safety for granted. She had learned that danger could come from unexpected places, that the people who were supposed to protect you could sometimes need protection themselves, and that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite being afraid. Most importantly, she had learned that love was not a simple thing, not just something that flowed from adult to child or protector to protected. Love was complex and mutual and capable of making people stronger than they ever thought they could be. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was of Marcus's face when she had told him she loved him, the way his expression had transformed from surprise to joy to something deeper and more lasting than either of them had expected. In the morning, there would be police interviews and insurance claims and security consultations. There would be therapy sessions and new safety protocols and probably a different route to piano lessons. The practical aftermath of their ordeal would unfold in all its complicated detail. But tonight, in the quiet safety of her room, Emma simply held on to the knowledge that she and Marcus had faced the worst thing that had ever happened to either of them, and they had faced it together. They had taken care of each other when it mattered most, and that was a bond that no amount of money or power or fear could ever break. The little girl who had noticed that the driver took the wrong road had become something more than just a child in need of protection. She had become a partner, a source of strength, a reminder that courage could come in the smallest packages, and that love was always stronger than fear. And in the master bedroom down the hall, Marcus Harrison lay awake thinking the same thoughts, marveling at the way an 8-year-old girl had taught him something profound about bravery and love and the unexpected ways that people could save each other when the world became dark and dangerous. The wrong road had led them to the right understanding of what they meant to each other, and that was worth more than all the money in the world.